Hello, welcome to my speech. I'm sorry that this is 10 minutes long. I did not read the directions. On September 30th, I was scrolling through Reddit and I saw this wild conspiracy theory. The theory was talking about how overpopulation as a whole is a myth, and that's why abortion should be illegal. I quickly disregarded it as alt-right propaganda, but a few weeks later I saw the very same theory phrased a bit differently by the alt-left. This is when I got curious. Two opposite sides of the political spectrum coming together with this one theory. I looked into it, and I realized that there was a lot of truth to what they were saying. I didn't write this speech to encourage you to stop caring about the environment and to feel entitled to do what you want. I just think there's better ways to deal with our potentially decaying Earth than to fall victim to the misunderstood notion of overpopulation. Before we start, let's define some terms. Overpopulation describes a situation where the number of people exhausts the resource in a closed environment. Moreover, overpopulation is defined as a problem created by numbers of people and not their behaviors. So where did the concept of overpopulation come from? Well, in 1798, a British philosopher by the name of Thomas Malthus created a theory surrounding the fact that food production increases incrementally while people reproduce exponentially. Malthus then concluded that by 1890 the world would be out of food due to overpopulation. Thomas's simple solution was to kill off the derelicts of society, or what's now called depopulation. Thomas stated, "Instead of recommending cleanliness to the poor, we should encourage contrary habits. In our towns, we should crowd more people and court the return of the plague. But above all, we should reprobate specific remedies for ravaging diseases and those benevolent but much mistaken men who have thought they were doing a service to mankind by projecting schemes for the total expiration of particular disorders." In other words, fuck poor people and fuck doctors. His theory was later picked up by Paul Ehrlich in 1968. He first announced at Stanford University that 1/5 of humanity would die from rampant famines by the end of the 1970s. He soon published his book, The Population Bomb, which incited the modern worldwide fear of overpopulation. One of Ehrlich's most shocking proposals to fix this issue was to spike food and water with sterilizing drugs and then hold a government-run lottery for the antidote. Both Thomas and Ehrlich thought that the poor were the culprits in the case of overpopulation, and this notion has swiftly carried into the 21st century. Often, when you hear people talk about overpopulation, they refer to third world countries and how they simply have too many children. Malthus's views are dangerous and can quickly deteriorate into social engineering based on a sort of eugenics. So, we must deepen our understanding of the issue and focus on what exactly needs to be done. Obviously, Malthus was wrong, but briefly, between 1940 and 1960, his theory looks like it might be real. This was during the infamous baby boom. Another thing that grew during this time was the feminist movement and strides towards equal rights. Once more people gained agency over their bodies, the population growth regulated from exponential back to linear. The Guttmacher Institute says that improving access to contraceptives are driving recent declines in birth and pregnancy rates. When people are given the choice and the means to have agency over their bodies and lives, population growth goes down. There's no reason to care about exponential population growth if you care about sustainably improving quality of life on an equal basis. There's a widely spoken about misconception that the Earth simply does not have enough resources to accommodate the population, but this notion is false. Authority figures often tell us that we're at fault for droughts and water shortages, that the general population simply consumes too much water. This does have truth to it, but not in the 45-minute showers or leaving the sink on way that you might think. According to the World Bank, the personal use water for every person on Earth, so the water we drink, flush, and wash with, only accounts for 8% of our freshwater use each year. The rest of the water is given to big corporations for agriculture and industry purposes. One of the biggest water drainers in the country is meat. According to the LA Times, a third-pound burger requires 660 gallons of water to produce. One of the main things we feed our cows is a plant called alfalfa. Growing 1 kilogram of alfalfa equates to 510 liters of embedded water. The alfalfa farmers in Southern California pay next to nothing for the water they use, so the true cost of the water doesn't necessarily end up in the cost of the burger. That's why you can get a burger from McDonald's and pay as little as $1.69. Southern California alfalfa farmers alone use over 2 trillion gallons of water, sometimes due to their extremely inefficient irrigation methods, like flooding. Literally just flooding acres of crops in the middle of the California desert. Water in most places is treated as if we will always have enough, and agriculture and big companies continue to use it in extraordinarily wasteful ways. If we were to more appropriately price water, Sure, the economy would take a hit, but companies would be forced to make different decisions about where they set up operations, and they'd be forced to start taking the longevity of Earth's resources into account. Increasing the price of water could also encourage the governments to put money into the worldwide faulty water infrastructure. The American Water Works Association says that an estimated 2.1 trillion gallons of water are lost each year in America due to the crumbling water infrastructure. That equates to 5.7 billion gallons of water per day solely in this country. We lose more water per day than the whole state of California would consume in 2. However, none of this is really surprising when you think about the fact that much of the nation's water infrastructure is now a century old. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like fixing all the pipes in America and relocating crops to more appropriate places will be easy, but it's probably easy and definitely more moral than continuing an unsustainable system for the most important resource on Earth, water. If we work for it, we will easily be able to sustain the growing population numbers the future has to offer. Now let's talk about the second most important resource, food. I know that famine is always phrased as this unsolvable issue that we're destined to live with. People will say, finish your food and be grateful you're not one of those starving kids in Africa. But famines are not insoluble natural disasters. They're the result of catastrophic political failure. The World Food Program says that there's enough food in the world today for everyone to have nourishment for a healthy life. And the United Nations agrees that, quote, the world currently produces enough food for everybody. The University of Michigan takes it a step farther and says we could feed 141% of the people who are alive right now, meaning we could feed 3 billion more people than live on Earth without changing a single thing about production. So it's safe to say that it's universally agreed upon that this Earth possesses enough food for all of us. So where does the problem lie? Why is world hunger such a prominent issue if not due to overpopulation and simply not having enough food? The 2020 Global Report on the biggest drivers of hunger can answer that. Coming in number 1 is conflict. Well, that makes perfect sense. Wars are generally known to destroy land, crops, uproot families, destroy economies, ruin infrastructure, and overall halt the agricultural production. Number 2 on the list is food waste. The World Program states that if we could recover all the food we lose and waste every year, we could feed every man, woman, child on the planet twice over. Other leading causes include poverty, gender-based issues, extreme weather, and lack of infrastructure. Overpopulation is nowhere to be found on the list. As the Population Institute says, reducing the number of hungry people will not make the remainder less hungry. Those who have access to food will continue to have access, and those who don't will continue to be hungry. Don't be worried about food sources in the future either. Over the last 6 decades, population has doubled. However, food production has tripled. There's never been a time where food production hasn't kept up with population growth. Technology that feeds us has been growing at an increasing rate, and signs do not point to it stopping. Ever. After learning about the extreme food and water waste we have, you may be asking yourself how this all came to be. Well, surprise, surprise, it's rooted in capitalism. The market system is simply not built to deal with waste or distribution. Markets usually come in the form of money to product transactions. They give you the product and you give them the money. Now, what if someone simply doesn't have enough money to buy food? Sorry, nothing personal, that's not the market's problem. Now, let's say the market has a surplus of extra food that's not being bought. Since it cannot be sold, it's thrown away. Some products are even thrown away before this if they don't look appealing or less likely to be bought by customers. We may ask ourselves, why are we not feeding 3 billion extra people with our waste? The simple answer is there's no money in it. In terms of space, there's absolutely nothing to be worried about. While it may not always seem like it, Earth is a huge place and we're tiny beings. According to the Population Research Institute, the entire population of the world can be housed in the U.S. state of Texas, and very comfortably, with each person having their own house and own backyard. This doesn't account for areas where we haven't gotten around to yet. According to sentientmedia.org, only 65% of the Earth is explored. The commonly held Thomas Malthus-inspired view of overpopulation places the blame on the people. But responsibility lies in the ruling class in the current mode of production. It makes sense that in a capitalist society, the members of the bourgeoisie, like Thomas Malthus, might look at this issue of sustainability and durability of the earth and see population itself as the problem. Why choose to face the idea that inefficient modes of production and distribution, ones that waste and pollute more but are significantly cheaper and yield more profit, could be the cause? It's not hard to look into a crowded street and say this is overpopulation. I mean, the reason the theory is so popular is because it seems plausible. But if we begin by solving the real impending problems like food distribution and human rights, we will see that we have enough space. We have enough food and we have enough water for everyone, and the notion of overpopulation is truly just a distraction from the work that needs to be done. Now, don't get me wrong, we have water and food crises worldwide, and I encourage you to do whatever you can personally to conserve those resources. But the crisis doesn't truly lie within the general population's actions. As Gandhi said, the world has enough for everyone's needs, but not enough for everyone's greed.